and welcome to another episode of the Tambua Women in Tech Fireside Chat. For the past year, we have given shout-outs to over 88 women across the world with a focus on ensuring their stories are told to the rest of the world, and we create visibility for the work they're doing, their journey, the challenges they face, and how they got to where they are. Today, we are going to be joined by Danielle all the way from Florida as she gets to tell us about her journey and more about just who she is, the fantastic person that she is. Hi, Danielle.
Hi there. Wow, that's such an introduction. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Um,
How you
yeah,
doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. It's fairly early in the morning here, but I've turned into a morning person, so that's good for me.
I'm not a morning person, so I cannot relate. I know I've already mentioned your name, but it would just be good to know who you are, what you do, and just a brief about you as an individual.
Absolutely, of course. Well, I'm Danielle Cox, like you said, and I'm from Florida, which is the southeast part of the United States for any of our listeners that are not versed in their United States geography. So I'm down like very much the southeasternmost part of the country, and I work with Flutter, and so that's actually how we met was at Flutter Forward, which happened. We decided 7 weeks ago today, which is amazing. And so yeah, so I lead a team of four developers, and we work on Flutter Web, and it's a neat project. I really like that. I learned about Flutter about 4 years ago. Before that, I programmed in lots of different things like PHP on a back end. I've done database work. I created OLTP for gift cards, which is basically I call myself the scorekeeper. I'm the one that kept track of whether the gift card had money on it, whether you could use it, things like that. And my journey goes all the way back to I bought my first computer in 1981, a Commodore VIC-20, and I got everybody to give me all the money they would give me for Christmas and chipped in my life savings. I was in high school, and I bought a Commodore VIC-20, and from that point, I knew I really wanted to work with computers, and so I went to the University of Oklahoma, and which is in the center part of the country, and that's where I grew up. And so yeah, and so since then I've been working hard making a living.
Oh, wow. I'm curious to know what happened to your first computer before we get into the first conversation. I hope.
I actually have it. I still have it. I do. It's in a box. I have not hooked it up to a TV in forever, but I definitely still have it.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And I have somewhere I have a box of well that one actually ran on a cassette tape drive. So it looked like a normal cassette drive, but it was plugged in and you could do that. I did one thing that was really kind of cool is I got my dad to really like it. So he bought us the Commodore 64 with a disk drive. And so that changed my gaming experience quite a bit back then. So that was fun. And that's of course that's one of the things that we would do is play games on it a lot. And then I also programmed on it some.
So you are playing the games as well as programming, and I know some people who are going to be watching you have be like, "What is a cassette?"
Oh, that's a great. Way before CDs.
Yeah, they just
Yeah,
get
it's a magnetic medium, and it's on a reel, and so you put it in, and but we would listen to music on them normally,
yeah.
and
You know what a cassette is.
I know.
Happy to say at least I managed to play with a few, or just at least use a few. So we're talking about you've mentioned that your journey started like in the 1980s, and you have been programming since to now.
Mhm.
But we still talk about the fact that this is a male-dominated field. So for somebody who has been in the industry for so long, so I'd say, what are some of the challenges that you faced, and what are some of the things you have observed over time?
Sure. Well, like I said, I went to the University of Oklahoma, and I don't know how big my class was, but it had to have been, hundreds of people, and we had five women in my class. So it definitely was male dominated. And one of the things, though, that has been interesting is because I think computers have been a young enough field, it didn't have quite the overt sexism that a lot of, I think, of other jobs did. But we definitely still had problems. And the example I give people is if I were talking to any of my friends and I said, could you be a doctor? They would all say, yes, of course I could be a doctor. But because what we saw on TV and what we saw, whenever in movies and wherever like that, the women were not doctors, they were nurses. If you just said, what do you want to be when you grow up? They might say a nurse.
Mm.
Not because they wanted to be the nurse over at the doctor. It's just because that's what they saw. So so we didn't have any real role models back then. I mean, even people that might be role models today that around, we just didn't talk about them. We didn't know about them. So like the Ada Lovelace is probably the first person to have ever written a computer program, and she lived back in the early 1800s. And we didn't really start talking about her until the late 80s after that. Um, so while like I said, we didn't have role models. And so I think that's one of the more insidious things, was that it wasn't that we wouldn't hire women. It's the fact that we didn't think to go into computers to get hired, you know. So yeah, I've not really, I guess that's how I want to say it, is what I've experienced as far as, being female in the industry has not been, like I said, it's not been someone saying, "Oh no, you're a woman, you can't do this." It's just been there's not any of us around. And so I hope that's changing to the better. And that's part of why things like this are important, is to make sure that our young females especially have role models to look up to, and they look at it and say, "I can do that." That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good time for me to bring up the Flutteristas. So I'm one of the co-organizers of a group called the Flutteristas. And so in January of 2019 is when I discovered Flutter. And at that point in time, I met Emily, and they were a Googler at the time, who had started this group called the Flutteristas. And so they invited me to join. And being around a large group of women in tech, and hearing their challenges, but also their struggles, it was very enlightening, and it's really powerful. And that's how come now I'm one of the co-organizers of it, is because when Emily left and said, can anybody take this over, please? I couldn't raise my hand fast enough, because it's that important, I think. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's important, I think. And I also, just based on what I said there, I also want to bring up the fact that my journey in the US is different than a lot of people's journeys in a lot of other places. I know we still struggle a lot more in other places.
Yeah, we sure do. But there's something important you mentioned, the fact that in the 80s there was no role model you could look up to. And just getting to even hear about Ada Lovelace's story like years later. And then now there's a whole community of Flutteristas who just, developers, women and non-binary coming together to just share the challenges, discover new things together. I'm just going to ask you something. What do you think is the main impact of having such a community? You as a co-organizer who's at the forefront of everything that's happening in the Flutter space for the women and non-binary. So what is the major impact that you are observing? Because I feel like these communities are now providing moral models. If somebody was to look you up and they'd be like, when I grow up, I want to be like, Danielle, I want to learn more from her. I want to be able to create that impact. So what do you think is the major thing that most people who are just joining the space get to, take away?
I think that's actually it. I think the biggest thing, from my mind, the biggest thing is to see other people that are like you that are doing this. And so that can help inspire you to want to do it. It can give you the confidence that you can do it. And it also, we provide the opportunity to help people get better. So we've had our Flutterista conference, for example. We're planning the next one. And in that, my philosophy on that is I want to put on a top-notch conference. But anybody that wants to speak, my call for papers is different than everybody else's, because when, any Flutterista that wants to speak, I'm going to find a way for them to be able to be on stage and speak, and do a good job. So we for the last one, we were able to get some training. Google brought in some training for us for speaker training. We probably don't, in this climate, we probably don't have that kind of a budget, but those of us that took it, I think, would be happy to help the people around. We do, rehearsals, we do stuff like that. So if someone gives a proposal for a talk that may not be good enough, I don't want to say no. I want to say, let's figure out how to make it good. Do I need to pair you with somebody else that can help you? Do we need to do a co-talk with two people? Do we need to, do we just need to work on figuring out what it is, or tightening up the concept, or whatever it is we need to do? But the bottom line is we're going to find a way to make it work, as opposed to, normal out in the world. They don't, that's not the priority for them. They just want to have a great conference, and they'll take the people they need to take. So I think that those kinds of opportunities, the inspiration, the confidence building, those are the real things there. but I don't want to underestimate that there are places in the world where women and men in a social group, even work like this setting, can't coexist very well, you know? And so we do offer that kind of a safe space. And we do definitely have some people from parts of the world where, you know, the women can't really talk if there's guys around, you know, stuff like that. And so I think that's important. I don't know if that would be enough to keep me going. I think it's more the rest of it, but that to me is very important. And when we had our conference, we had people that we had very few. It was mostly very well done. We had a few people who were making rude comments about some of our speakers, and so we had to, you know, they got booted, of course, and the comments got removed. But we still deal with that, and I don't mean rude like these people are bad. Why are they on there? Whatever, things like that. I mean rude like because they were female.
Wow.
And so yeah, so you know, as privileged as I am, you know, growing up how I did in the US, I think there's still definitely places where it's just not as good still. And I think most places are somewhere in between.
Yeah. It's just I like the approach that you're using to just encourage more women to even speak, because I can only imagine, like, if I do like 3 speaker submissions and then all of them get declined, I don't think I'm ever going to apply for like the next 5 years or something. It's a bit discouraging. But here you are, when you do the call for speakers, you're giving them a chance to just be helped in their journey. How do you maybe make a good abstract for your audience, things like that. Really, really impressive work you're doing. But let's go back to something else you also mentioned, the fact that you have done different technologies before settling to Flutter. So how do you ensure that, okay, one, I think this is a two-part question. One is, how do you keep track with these different technologies, what's happening in these spaces? And then how do you make a decision that this is what I want to actually stick to?
Sure. Okay. One thing I am not proud of on my journey that came out on we had a Flutteristas panel at Flutter Forward, and you know, Maureen Johnson, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know, um, she talked about her journey and some things that she had done in her career, and that really strikes hard with me because I think I've gone the other way, and I've always played it safe. So I have not really ever gone out and just said, okay, I'm going to challenge myself and take this risk. You know, I typically do things safely. So that's something I wonder how it would be how it would be different if I had not had that, that almost spirit. And that may be coming from growing up as I did, in the 70s and 80s, where we had some power, but not a lot yet. My thing just went off. Hold on. There's automatic lights in my office. I hadn't moved it up, so they just shut off. Anyway, so how have I gone about that? When I was in college, I fell in with a group of people, all guys, who ran the computer engineering network at OU. And so that's where I learned how to program in C, long before they taught me C in college. And I started learning how things kind of worked in the real world that way. And so so that gave me a jump start into that kind of technology. And then I ended up actually working customer service for a startup computer company back in the late 80s, early 90s, up in Massachusetts, which is up in the northeast part of the country. And while doing that, I started working a lot more on databases, SQL stuff. And so that actually led to the next, I don't know, that led to a part of my career coming up after that. So I was also fixing bugs in the Unix kernel. So my next job was at a startup where I was working at very low level kernel related stuff. So it kind of just grew out of what I knew. But after that, I was working database for the next 10 years. I was doing database stuff, not DBA work, not structuring the database stuff, but actually writing the programs that would interact with the database, that would come in and out of that. And so that's what I did for quite a while on that. And then, from there, like when I was programming PHP is basically C with the hard parts taken out. So it kind of just grew from that. And that I actually, um, like so many people do, maybe for a different reason, but like so many people do, I did take a, I don't know, an 8, 9 year hiatus where I was not actively working.
Mhm.
And the way I got back into that was with friends that knew my work from before. And so I got hired on one of those places, and that brought me up to where I could, go out and get a job out in the real market after that. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of how I got here on the different technologies. So I don't have a great answer on, oh, I decided, except for Flutter.
Mhm.
I take it back. But with Flutter, I was, at the startup I was working at that time, I was that, I went to the conference I went to the Dev Fest Florida. I went to that conference because my company was talking about running out of money. They still haven't actually. I'm not there anymore, but they still are paying people, so that's a good thing. But they were talking about having, running out of money. And so that made me think I've got to go learn something new. And that's when I discovered Flutter. But even when I went back, I still worked at that company for another couple of years, but I was able to take Flutter in. And I was doing some Android development for them at the time. And so I took one of our products that we created a progressive web app on, and I just created a Flutter app for it that would run everywhere. And that was a great proof of concept for me, and it let me do that. So that is a case where I reached out. But that's the last thing with Flutter.
Yeah, there was a need for you to learn something new. Um, but with all these different technology, how do you keep up? How do you like even after you took the is it a 8 or 9 year break? How did you ensure that when you got back to doing this, and it's good you've talked about having friends who could actually speak on your behalf in a way. Reminds me of a very interesting article by Prosper Otemwea. He's based in Nigeria, where he talks about who's speaking on your behalf in a room. When you're not there, who's just going to voice that this person can actually deliver. But how do you keep up with this content? You know, for you to even be managing a team of Flutter web devs. So how do you keep up?
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, okay. That's a good question. How did I get back into it? I actually wasn't sure how that was going to work totally, and I was happy that the muscle memory of 20 years of programming kind of came back real quick. So that part worked easier than I thought it would. But even then, a week later, I was better than I was to start with, and a month after that, I was remembering more things or learning more things than I had before, and seeing how things were different. So that was good. And the fact that I went back into PHP, having come from C programming, really was not that hard. What was hard was just remembering the things about how things worked and stuff. So that part I don't have great advice on, because it just kind of worked for me, based on me. Um, and I am a little bit I find it interesting the quote from you, because I've taken Google runs or they spawn I don't know if it's sponsor I don't know what the right thing is. They created a program called I Am Remarkable
Mhm.
for women in tech. And kind of the theory from that's the exact opposite of, you don't know who's speaking on your behalf. It's kind of nobody's speaking on your behalf. You need to make sure you speak up for yourself. Um, yeah, I think that trying to maintain contacts with people is a good thing. So if you are going to take a break and you think you're going to want to come back, I think making sure that you talk to the people that you were talking to before on a technical thing, not every day, not like you were before, but every few months, pick up the phone, see how things are going. And how do I keep up with things now though? Because Flutter is still new enough; it's moving very, very rapidly. Um, and that's very relevant, I think. And that's a lot of things. It's reading the stuff that comes out from the Flutter team. It's looking over the release notes when a new release comes out. It's watching you know trusted YouTube videos from people that are there. In Flutter, we have something called Hump Day Q&A that the community puts on every Wednesday. Um, and so that's going to be something I actually go and talk on that on a regular basis. So um, the bottom line is, find a way that you like to consume information. And because if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. And I think that's true in a lot of things. It's very difficult to make yourself study on a subject you hate. But if you love the subject, it's almost just reading, you know,
Yeah.
so find a way. So if you like watching videos, watch videos. If you want to be hands-on and you see that a new feature was released in whatever your target thing you're developing with, if you see that there's a new feature that's released, go play with it, try it out, see if you can make it work. Um, I'm very Flutter specific. I know the audience isn't necessarily Flutter specific, but I'm very Flutter specific. So for example, at the keynote for Flutter Forward, which we had recently, they showed several different demos of things that were coming up. And the first thing that a lot of the people in the community do is they go and they actually figure out how they can build it themselves. And so like they had, like, for example, these 3D dashes running around the screen, which is kind of neat on an old iPhone. It was really cool. But people do that. But if you do something like that, then you should change the number of them. You should maybe change if you can come up with another shape, change the shape of what you're dealing with, the object. Flip it upside down, do whatever, and play around with stuff. And that curiosity is how you keep up with things. So not just typing in a project or doing a code lab or something like that, but then figuring out, okay, well, gee, if it does this, I wonder if I can make that happen. Flutter has if you've ever run a Flutter program, it's almost the stupidest thing ever because we see it all the time. But the default Flutter program is a counter. And so it's just got a number on there. And if you hit the button, it raises the number, right? So if you do that, do something where make it double every time. Don't make it +1, make it alternate between like +3 and -1 or whatever. Figure out ways to take what's there and play with it. Change the font, change what the button's just a plus sign. Make it say the word add one, make it do the Fibonacci sequence. I mean, whatever, but you can take something like that that's very simple, and you can either look at it and say, okay, I understand it, I've done it, and move on to the next thing. Or you can kind of give yourself a little bit of homework and really make sure you understand, what does this part do? What does that part do? Why is this happening? Why is it centered? Why, well, it's got a center widget. Why does it have the center widget in it? Because the column also is centering things. Why are we doing these different things like that? And if you understand that, it helps you on the next thing that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think curiosity is good. But I think, like I said, just consuming content and taking some time for it. I mean, they all don't know this, but we were scheduled last week and I was in the middle of a huge crunch and couldn't do it. And, if you let your life be like that, then you will not catch up and you won't know. So you have to do that. And by the way, I've got another meeting that's happening exactly this moment. And I said, nope, I'm coming here. So yes. Okay. Let me actually, I told my boss, who happens to be the CEO of the company, I said, I'm coming here, I'm doing this, unless you say I absolutely cannot. So I did do that, but I laid it out very much so that I'm doing this now, because last week I couldn't do it. This week I've told them I'm doing this. So you guys, if you absolutely have to have me, I have my phone with me. If something comes up and I have to be in this meeting, call me. But other than that, no, I'm doing this because it's important.
Thank you. You're making us feel better, just talking about it. Like, but there's something I want to go back to, the curiosity aspect. I think I am guilty for the fact that when I ran the fast Flutter app, and then I just saw the count and I was like, oh, it's working. So this is, and then I looked and like, I was not curious enough to see what else I could do with it. Then I was like, this is going to be hard to try to play around with. Let me just go back to Kotlin. Yeah, Android developer, Kotlin is just there. But now, listening to you talk about the fact we should be curious, what else can you do with whatever is before you? You've given the example of the 3D that was displayed during Flutter Forward. So what else can you do? And I've seen a couple of Flutter developers post the event, trying to just play around with it. And this is what makes them even stand out in whatever they're doing. Because if you can play around with what the other team is working on, you build an audience for yourself also. You're leading a team of 4 Flutter web developers. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
That's correct. Well, I say it, I'm one of them, by the way. So I am one of them. So there's 3 other people plus me.
3 people plus. Actually, my question was without knowing that. But now even makes it better. How do you ensure that now you're part of the team? Now I have to really think of how I want to structure this question. So you're part of the team, at the same time you are leading the team. How do you go about the leadership aspects, passing down the knowledge, the information, the requirements as the project lead or as the team lead?
Sure. And I think that we should probably bring up the fact that in general, or the way often women and men have totally different leadership styles.
Yeah.
And it's people are used to the male leadership style. So sometimes I think that we can get in our own way that way. And sometimes we're the people that work for us are, or when we work for a female boss, we can be our own worst enemies, I think. So we need to be aware of that. So I try to what I'm trying to do here is I've got another Flutterista that works for me, and yeah, her name's Rona, and then I've got a more junior developer, and then I've got an intern. And so how I deal with them has to be different, and because they're Rona can do I can tell Rona to go do anything and she can do it, and then so when she comes back with a PR for a code review, I can look at it and can say, okay, yeah, but we could do it this way better, and if we do it this way, it's going to be more maintainable in the future, or this will fit with my plans in the future that you didn't know about yet, better, or things like that. So with her, it's a lot more of that kind of a, just a, you know, looking it over and then maybe giving some direction on like architecture style, of how we're going to do it, how we organize this widget or whatever. With the intern, it's like just teaching, period. We sit there and I just work through teaching him. And so there's not, I mean, the leadership there is, okay, you're going to go work on this. And then sometimes I have to worry about, how long is it going to take him to do this task? And how do I do it in such a way that I'm not spending, a lot more time than it would take me to just go do it to help him get there and help him along. Because I think with an intern, it's a, it's a two-way street. I mean, the whole purpose of having an intern there is to teach them, but also to get some useful work out of it, and so balancing that is something I'm still struggling with, making sure that I do a good enough job of giving him value, but also to bring in the, from that standpoint. And then the other one is probably the easiest. That's just straight up, I tell him what to do. I give him an idea of how to do it. I go in and code review, see if he's done it the same way or not, and go from there.
Yeah, I like the approach actually. I'm like the fact that you are dedicating time to each of those three individuals. Whether the one is like really, really good, but still when you're doing the review, you give feedback. And then for the intern, it's more like the intern gets to learn from you. I think that's what misses out in most companies actually. Here we have a joke that you may have an intern, but what they're doing is fetching coffee. And so what exactly does the whole 6-month internship process, what are they going to learn from there? And some will joke that they learn how to be patient, but you're like, at the end of the day, this person needs to learn how to execute. How is it like working with real life projects? So the fact that you dedicate time to educate or slash train the intern that you're having is actually quite an impressive approach. I'm really hoping most people who are going to be listening to this, if you're a project lead, kindly consider doing this. Amazing approach there. So when you lead your team, these three people are more, it's a close-up group, it's a close-knit group where they get to share and also just learn from one another, which is great. But when you get back to the community, you're also doing leadership. You are running Flutteristas, which has lots of women there, right? How do you balance? How do you balance work and also your community side of things and life in general?
Well, as we proved last week, I don't always succeed at that. So yes, it's priorities. It's you have to, I have to make sure that I do enough to keep my job happy because I have to have the paycheck. Okay, great. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I have to give them everything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that and it doesn't mean they're expecting me to be working 24 hours during the day or even every waking hour. They don't expect that either. So that does mean I have some free time. And so, I have family is probably the most, highest priority, but unfortunately they're also the most forgiving. So they're the ones that have a tendency to let you get away with ignoring them a little bit too much. So I think that can be, you know, I'm sure any of our moms of young kids are laughing at me right now about that comment, but in general, that's the case. We can do that. All right. So, all right. So sorry about that again. And so, all right. So anyway, so Yeah, and then with Flutteristas is probably, you know, part of how I've gotten around that is the fact that we've grown the team from just Steph and myself to about 6 of us that lead it. And so part of how I dealt with that was recognizing the fact that I can't do everything, and I'm not good at everything. And so we try to find people that are good at the other parts to that and bring them in. And I think that's always important is figuring out your support structure, because if any of us have to do it all on our own, that's just a lot harder journey.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Having a core team is very, very important. I think that's quite relatable. I used to be a co-organizer for GDG Kisumu, and we used to think we could do it all alone. Like, we can organize, we can look for speakers, we can get venue, we can just sort everything, branding. And a few weeks to one of our major dev fests, we were stranded and we were like, oh no, we forgot to pay for venue. So the venue that we were supposed to go for had already been booked and taken by someone else. So now we have to like think, okay, how are we going to go about this? And then jokingly, we were like, let's bring somebody who knows a lot of people, maybe they may help. And it turned out like just few phone calls and the person was able to take it. I'm like, oh wow, we really do need more hands on deck other than just,
Of course.
we can do this on our own. So yeah, it's really, really impressive to, know that you have a core team. As for the family aspect, yeah, they are the most forgiving. So
But the
yeah.
most important, that's the thing. So anybody that's listening to this and you're thinking you've got it made because you've got a I don't know, a spouse that does everything for you, that would be kind of fun. But or you've got, your kids are old enough now that they're, you don't have to be there all the time for them and stuff. Stop and think though, okay, the necessity of that may be true, but what do you really want? You know, um, because for most of us, I think that's very important, and I think we ignore it more than we should.
Yeah, quite true. Quite true. So the most supportive support system actually is family. I feel like mine has been there through, ups and downs, and one way or another, they'll always like be there when you need them more than anyone else. And I tend to take a step back. I like the fact that you took that 8-9 year break.
Mhm.
Maybe it's personal, you'd not want to share on the call, but I think it's really, really impressive how you're able to bounce back and be the remarkable woman you are.
Thank you.
So we are almost at time.
Mhm.
I would like just to see if you have any more insights you want to share before we jump into the last part, which is just you giving more like, words of wisdom to whoever is
Okay.
going to be watching this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I have anything else I really necessarily need to share.
Mhm.
Um, from that standpoint, uh, I I I do better answering the questions than I do thinking of my topics on my own. That's true of talks too, by the way. Tech talks. It's a lot easier once you've got the topic to come up with what you want to say.
Yeah.
It's harder to come up with the topic. Um,
Much
but
easier
I
on the abstract.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I do have, I think, some words of wisdom, which is to to as much as you want to, as much as you're willing to, be that role model for other people, and take advantage of the ones that are there. So when you're early on, latch on to people, and they can really help you out, and you can see things. And just because you have a role model doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they're doing, but learn from it, you know. Um, and then and it's a I don't know. It's not an obligation. You don't have to give back to the community at all, but it's a good thing to do that. And I think you will prosper from it. I mean, joining the Flutteristas and hearing other people's stories made me realize that just because I haven't gone through any overt discrimination doesn't mean that it's not a problem. It doesn't mean that I can't use my position to help with that. And so that's the reason why I've really jumped in on that. So I think that take a look at that and see what you can do and give back when you can. If you like Flutter, come join the Flutteristas. You can find me on Twitter and DM me. I will make sure you get in. It's there's a little bit of a process and it's a little bit behind. So if you talk to me directly, then I will do that. I'm Danielle Cox the Flutterfly on Twitter. So um, yeah, but that's my thing is you know you find role models that you can look up to, and then when you get to the point, be a role model.
Wow. Yeah. It's like just a trickle effect. Find one and then also be one. Yeah, so we will be sharing Danielle's Twitter handle with those who are keen on just DMing her and being part of the amazing community she's running. And also maybe if you want her to be your role model, I feel like personally, if I was in the Flutter space, but other than just Flutter, just listening to her experience over time, what she's done, the impact she's creating right now, just marvelous to hear. She's like the other Lovelace of our generation. So give whoop whoop. So once again, thank you so much, Danielle. It is just great hearing your story, what you have shared, the insights, and also the words of wisdom. Yes, find a role model, please. If you're watching this, find one and try to be one also to others. That's it from my end. I do not have any other questions, but thank you so much, Danielle. We are super grateful.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the shout out when I got that. I was very proud of that. And so now doing a fireside chat is just also amazing.
Yay. Thank you, and looking forward to future interactions. Thanks a lot.
Of course, thank you.
Okay.